Admiral Kethavar stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Sovereign's Wrath, watching the blue marble of Earth grow larger through the massive viewport. His forearms crossed behind his back as he surveyed what should have been an easy conquest. The galactic dominion had crushed 1,000 worlds, each one falling within days of their arrival. Yet something felt different about this small planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. Admiral, his tactical officer, a scaled Vorthak named Zesalin, approached with visible nervousness. Our advanced scouts have returned. The humans. They're not responding as expected. Kethavar's mandibles clicked in amusement. Of course they aren't. These primitives probably don't even understand our demands for surrender. Have they tried to flee their system yet? No, sir. That's what concerns me. Every other species we've encountered has either immediately surrendered or attempted to evacuate their core worlds. The humans are doing neither. They're mobilizing. The Admiral turned his massive frame toward the tactical display. Earth's orbital infrastructure was indeed active, but not in the panicked way he'd seen countless times before. Ships were moving with purpose, not desperation. Military installations were powering up, not shutting down. Most puzzling of all, civilian populations weren't fleeing to the outer colonies. "Show me their military capabilities," Kethavar commanded, the holographic display illuminated with data streams. The Vorthak officer's scales shifted to a darker hue as he read the information. Their technology is primitive by our standards. No energy shields, no plasma weaponry, no faster-than-light communication networks. Their ships still use chemical propulsion for the most part, with some basic fusion drives on their larger vessels. Then why do you seem concerned, Zesalin? A single battle group could pacify this entire system. It's not their technology, Admiral. It's their numbers. And their behavior patterns. Our behavioral analysts can't predict their responses. Every algorithm we run comes back with contradictory results. Some projections show immediate surrender, others show complete annihilation warfare. Kethavar studied the tactical display more carefully. Earth's military assets were indeed primitive, but they were numerous. Thousands of small craft, hundreds of larger ships, orbital defense platforms that looked crude but functional. The real surprise was the industrial capacity. Factories across the planet were working at maximum output, producing more ships and weapons even as the Dominion fleet approached. Perhaps they simply don't understand the futility of resistance, Kethavar mused. Open a communication channel. Let me speak to their leaders directly. The communications array crackled to life, and within moments a human face appeared on the main screen. The creature was smaller than most sapient species, with pale skin and short dark hair, but its eyes held an intensity that made even the Admiral pause. "I am Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force," the human said without preamble. "You are trespassing in human space. State your intentions." Kethavar's mandibles spread in what his species considered a smile. "I am Admiral Kethavar of the Galactic Dominion. Your species has been selected for integration into our empire. Surrender immediately, and your people will be granted the privilege of serving the Dominion. Resist, and we will take what we want by force." The human admiral stared at him for a long moment. Then, to Kethavar's complete surprise, she laughed. It wasn't the hysterical laughter of fear or the bitter laughter of despair. It was the sound of genuine amusement. "You're serious," Chen said, her laughter fading. "You actually think we're going to just roll over because you showed up with a big fleet? Your technology is inferior. Your numbers are insufficient. Your fate is inevitable," Kethavar replied, his tone growing colder. "I have conquered civilizations far more advanced than yours." "Maybe that's your problem," Chen said, leaning forward in her chair. "You've gotten used to conquering civilizations that were already civilized. We're still working on that part." The transmission ended, leaving Kethavar staring at a blank screen. Around the bridge, his crew exchanged uncertain glances. In 300 years of conquest, no species had ever simply dismissed the Dominion's demands with humor. "Sir," the communications officer spoke up hesitantly, "we're receiving thousands of transmissions from across the human system. Military channels, civilian broadcasts, even entertainment networks. They're all saying the same thing, which is, 'Come and take it.'" Kethavar's expression darkened. "Prepare the fleet for immediate assault. These primitives need to learn respect." As the Dominion ships moved into attack formation, Admiral Chen sat in her command center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Around her, holographic displays showed the disposition of every human ship, every defense platform, every weapon emplacement in the solar system. The numbers weren't encouraging. "Ma'am," her tactical officer reported, "Dominion fleet consists of 47 capital ships, each one larger than our biggest dreadnought. They have us outgunned by a factor of 10 to 1. "Good," Chen replied, surprising her staff. "If we were evenly matched, this might take a while." She turned to address the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to begin what may be the most important battle in human history. Not because of what we might win, but because of what we refuse to lose. These aliens think they know us. They think they understand what makes us tick. They're about to learn otherwise." On her personal screen, intelligence reports scrolled past. The Galactic Dominion controlled over 3,000 star systems, ruled by an alliance of 12 ancient species that had long ago perfected the art of conquest through technological superiority and psychological warfare. They had never encountered sustained resistance. Planets either surrendered immediately or were crushed within days. "Ma'am," her aide approached quietly, "the President is asking for a final assessment. Is there any possibility of negotiated settlement?" Chen looked up at the young officer. "Tell the President that humanity's answer to ultimatums has not changed in the past 5,000 years. We might negotiate our terms, but we don't negotiate our freedom." Above Earth's atmosphere, the first Dominion ships were entering weapons range. Their energy cannons, designed to crack planetary shields and vaporize cities, powered up with ominous precision. Admiral Kethvar watched the human ships move to intercept, noting their primitive formations and outdated tactics. "This will be over quickly," he told his crew. "Perhaps their defeat will serve as an example to other stubborn species." He could not have been more wrong. As the first shots of the war lit up the space around Earth, neither side understood that they were about to discover something unprecedented in galactic history. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable species that has never learned how to quit? The first Dominion plasma barrage lit up space like artificial stars. Admiral Chen watched from her command center as 3 human destroyers simply ceased to exist, vaporized by weapons that could melt asteroids. The remaining human ships scattered, their crude tactics looking like pure panic to the alien observers. "Direct hit on the UES Defiance," reported Lieutenant Torres, his voice steady despite the magnitude of their losses. "No survivors," Chen nodded grimly. They had expected this. The first engagement was never about winning. It was about learning. "Signal all ships. Execute Protocol 7. Across the solar system, human vessels began what appeared to be a complete retreat. The Dominion forces advanced confidently, their energy weapons cutting through Earth's outer defense perimeter like paper. Admiral Kethvar allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as enemy contacts disappeared from his tactical display. As expected, he announced to his bridge crew, "Inform the other task forces to begin orbital bombardment positions. We'll target their major population centers first, then their industrial capacity." But something was wrong. His tactical officer's scales had shifted to deep purple, a sign of extreme confusion among the Vorthak. "Admiral, we're reading some unusual energy signatures from the retreating vessels." "Explain." "They appear to be ejecting something. Small objects barely detectable. Our sensors are having difficulty getting clear readings." Kethvar studied the display. The human ships were indeed leaving a trail of tiny objects in their wake. Too small to be escape pods, too numerous to be debris. Perhaps their primitive technology is simply failing under stress. Continue the advance. What the Dominion scanners couldn't properly detect were tens of thousands of small, stealthed mines that the retreating human ships had been deploying. Not the crude explosive devices that most species used, but something far more insidious. Each mine contained a small nuclear warhead, but more importantly, each one was equipped with sensors and a basic AI that had been programmed with one simple directive: wait for the perfect moment. The Dominion fleet, feeling confident in their superiority, maintained tight formation as they pushed deeper into the system. Their shields were designed to stop energy weapons and large projectiles, not to detect small, nearly invisible objects drifting in space. Back on Earth, Colonel Marcus Webb coordinated the defensive grid from a bunker in Australia. He was a specialist in asymmetric warfare, someone who had spent his career figuring out how to fight enemies with superior technology. When the aliens arrived, he had immediately recognized what humanity was facing. "Signal from Deep Space Observatory," his communications officer reported. Dominion fleet is at Marker 7. Webb smiled. Marker 7 meant the alien fleet was now surrounded by approximately 50,000 mines, all of them invisible to Dominion sensors, all of them waiting. Tell Admiral Chen we're ready for Phase 2. 3 light minutes away, Chen received the message. Around her, the atmosphere in the command center was tense but determined. They had watched their ships die, watched their orbital platforms get destroyed, watched the aliens advance with arrogant confidence. Now it was time to show them why humanity had spent centuries perfecting the art of unpleasant surprises. All units, she announced on the fleet-wide channel, execute Broken Arrow. The signal was simple but devastating. Across thousands of cubic kilometers of space, the floating mines suddenly activated. Their sensors locked onto the nearest Dominion ship, their tiny engines fired, and they began accelerating toward their targets at tremendous speed. Admiral Kethvar's first indication of trouble was when his ship's defensive systems began firing automatically. "What are our point defense guns targeting?" he demanded. "Unknown contacts, sir. Thousands of them. They're coming from all directions." The Sovereign's wrath shuddered as the first mine detonated against its shields. The nuclear explosion was small by ship-to-ship standards, barely enough to drain a few percentage points of shield power, but there were thousands more coming and they were all perfectly coordinated. "Impossible," Kethvar breathed as his tactical display filled with red dots. "How did they deploy so many weapons without us detecting them?" His question was answered by a series of explosions that rippled through his formation. The mines weren't trying to penetrate shields with single detonations. They were swarming each ship, dozens at a time, overwhelming the defensive systems through sheer numbers. One ship, the heavy cruiser Eternal Dominance, lost its shields completely and took a direct hit to its main reactor. The explosion lit up space for several seconds, and when it faded, one of the Dominion's most powerful warships was gone. "Retreat," Kethvar ordered. "Fall back to defensive positions." But retreat proved impossible. The human mines were everywhere, and they seemed to know exactly where the Dominion ships were trying to go. Webb's programming had been elegant in its simplicity. The mines didn't just attack the nearest target. They coordinated with each other to cut off escape routes and force the aliens into kill zones. As the Dominion fleet struggled with the mine swarms, the human ships that had appeared to retreat suddenly returned. But they weren't attacking conventionally. Instead, they were launching missiles, thousands upon thousands of them. "Sir," Admiral Chen's weapons officer reported, "first salvo away. All birds are running hot and normal." The missiles weren't designed to penetrate alien shields any more than the mines were. Instead, they were nuclear-powered kinetic impactors, each one carrying a small fusion warhead that would detonate just before impact, turning the missile into a cloud of superheated plasma and metal, moving at a significant fraction of light speed. Kethvar watched in growing horror as his tactical display became a nightmare of overlapping threats, mines attacking from all directions, missiles incoming from the human ships and no clear avenue of escape. His fleet, which had seemed invincible just minutes before, was being systematically torn apart by enemies using weapons that shouldn't have been effective. "Sir, we're losing ships faster than our computers can track," his tactical officer reported, requesting permission to use antimatter torpedoes. "Granted. Fire everything." The Dominion's most powerful weapons lanced out toward the human fleet. Each antimatter torpedo carried enough destructive force to crack a moon, and the aliens watched with satisfaction as several human ships disappeared in brilliant flashes of annihilation. But the humans didn't break. Instead, they did something that no other species in the Dominion's experience had ever done. They immediately adapted. The surviving ships scattered into smaller formations, making themselves harder to target. They began using their fallen comrades' wrecks as cover, hiding behind the debris of their own losses, and they kept fighting. Colonel Webb, monitoring the battle from his bunker, allowed himself a grim smile. The aliens were learning the first rule of fighting humans. Killing some of them doesn't make the rest give up. "It makes them angry, sir," his aide reported. "We're getting reports from our deep space monitoring stations. The alien fleet that attacked us isn't alone. There are at least 6 more similar formations scattered throughout the outer system." Webb nodded. They had expected this too. The first battle was just the beginning. The real war was about to start, and humanity was about to teach the galaxy something it had never learned before: the difference between winning a battle and winning a war. As the first engagement wound down, Both sides took stock of their losses. The Dominion had lost 7 major ships and dozens of smaller vessels. The humans had lost more than twice that number. By any conventional measure, the aliens had won. But Admiral Chen wasn't conventional, and neither was her species. As she prepared for the next phase of the battle, she reflected on something her grandfather had told her years ago. The thing about humans, Sarah, is that we're really good at learning from our mistakes, and we make a lot of mistakes. The Dominion was about to discover just how quickly humans could learn. Admiral Kethvar retreated to the edge of the solar system, his remaining ships forming a defensive perimeter while he tried to understand what had just happened. His fleet, one of the Dominion's finest, had been mauled by primitives using weapons that barely qualified as military grade by galactic standards. Casualties? He asked his aide, though he already knew the answer would be unpleasant. 7 capital ships destroyed, 14 severely damaged. Approximately 40,000 crew members lost. The aide paused, consulting his data tablet. Admiral, there's something else. We've been monitoring human communications, and they're not behaving like any conquered species we've encountered. Explain. They're celebrating, not mourning their dead, not preparing for surrender negotiations. They're actually celebrating their losses as if they were victories. Kethavar's mandibles clicked in irritation. Every species the Dominion had encountered followed predictable patterns. Initial resistance, growing demoralization as losses mounted, then either surrender or complete collapse. The humans seemed to be following none of these patterns. On Earth, the celebration was indeed real, though perhaps not for the reasons the aliens imagined. Admiral Chen stood before the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the deep bunker, addressing not just Earth's military leadership, but representatives from every human colony in known space. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, we just proved something important. The Galactic Dominion isn't invincible. Their ships can be destroyed, their tactics can be countered, and their will can be tested. General Harrison, commander of Earth's ground forces, leaned forward. At what cost, Admiral? We lost 23 ships and over 15,000 personnel. A price we were prepared to pay, Chen replied without hesitation. But more importantly, we learned their weaknesses. Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons, not kinetic impacts. Their sensors can't detect our stealth technology, and their tactical doctrine assumes their enemies will fight conventionally. She gestured to the holographic display showing the battle analysis. We've been studying galactic warfare for 6 months since we first detected their approach. Every engagement in their history follows the same pattern. Overwhelming technological superiority breaks enemy morale within hours. They've never had to fight a prolonged campaign against an enemy willing to trade losses for knowledge. Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins, Earth's chief xenopsychologist, spoke up from her position at the conference table. The psychological profiles we've developed suggest they might be even more vulnerable than we thought. The Dominion species are all what we might call civilized races. They've been spacefaring for millennia. They think in terms of cost-benefit analysis, and they have no cultural framework for understanding species that choose mutual destruction over surrender. What are you saying, Doctor? Asked General Harrison. I'm saying they don't understand us because they can't understand us. Every species they've conquered has been rational about defeat. They calculate odds, assess options, and choose the path of least destruction. We don't do that, Chen nodded. Which brings us to Phase 3 of our defense plan. We're going to do something that will completely confuse them. We're going to attack. The room fell silent. Finally, General Harrison spoke. Admiral, with respect, we just barely survived their first assault. Our fleet is scattered, our orbital defenses are gone, and they still have 6 more task forces in the outer system. Exactly, Chen replied with a slight smile. They'll expect us to consolidate our remaining forces and prepare for a siege. Instead, we're going to hit them with everything we have left. Colonel Webb, who had been quietly reviewing tactical data, looked up. The minefield deployment was just the beginning, wasn't it? Colonel Webb understands, Chen said. Show them Operation Hornet's Nest. The holographic display shifted to show a strategic overview of the entire solar system. Red dots marked the positions of the 6 Dominion task forces, while blue indicators showed human assets. To most observers, it looked hopeless. The aliens had humanity completely surrounded. For the past 6 months, Chen explained, we've been preparing for this moment. Not just building ships and weapons, but positioning assets throughout the solar system. Hidden supply depots, concealed shipyards, camouflaged missile platforms. The Dominion thinks they're looking at Earth's military capacity, but they're only seeing about 20% of what we actually have. The display zoomed in on the asteroid belt, revealing dozens of hidden installations. Mining platforms that were actually missile batteries, cargo haulers that were actually armed with nuclear warheads, research stations that were actually command and control centers. We let them see our official fleet because we wanted them to underestimate us, Webb added. Every ship they destroyed in the first engagement was part of the plan. We needed them to commit to the system, to spread their forces out, to think they had us trapped. General Harrison stared at the display in amazement. How long have you been planning this? Since the moment we detected their approach vector, Chen replied. We knew we couldn't match their technology, so we had to be smarter. We had to think like humans, Dr. Hawkins smiled. The beautiful thing about our species is that we've spent our entire evolutionary history being the underdogs. Every other sapient species in the galaxy evolved as apex predators on their homeworlds. We evolved as persistence hunters who survived by being too stubborn to quit and too clever to fight fair. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent communication from the outer system monitoring stations. Admiral Chen, we're detecting movement from the Dominion fleets. All 6 task forces are converging on Earth's orbital zone. Estimated time to engagement 6 hours. Chen stood, her expression calm but determined. Perfect timing. Signal all hidden assets to begin Phase 3, and send a message to Admiral Kethvar. What should the message say, ma'am? Tell him we'd like to discuss surrender terms. 6 hours later, Admiral Kethvar received the human transmission with a mixture of relief and suspicion. Finally, these primitives were acting rationally. His combined fleet, now numbering over 200 ships, had taken position around Earth. No force in galactic history had ever resisted such overwhelming odds. Put them through, he ordered. Admiral Chen's face appeared on his screen, looking tired but not defeated. Admiral Kethvar, I'm prepared to discuss terms. Unconditional surrender, Kethvar replied immediately. Your species will be relocated to designated worlds within the Dominion. Your technology will be confiscated. Your military will be disbanded. Those terms are unacceptable, Chen said calmly. I have a counter-proposal. You are hardly in a position to negotiate, human. On the contrary, Chen smiled, and Kethvar felt an uncomfortable chill. I'm in exactly the position I want to be in. You see, Admiral, you've made a critical error. You assumed that the ships you destroyed were our real fleet. Before Kethvar could respond, his tactical officer's panicked voice filled the bridge. Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. Hundreds of previously unknown contacts are powering up. They're everywhere. The display lit up like a constellation as hidden human assets revealed themselves. The Dominion fleet, thinking they had their enemy surrounded, suddenly found themselves surrounded. From asteroids, from dead moons, from seemingly empty space, human weapons platforms and ships emerged like ghosts materializing in daylight. You wanted to negotiate surrender terms, Admiral Chen said, her image still on Kethvar's screen. Here are mine. Leave our system immediately, and we'll let you live long enough to warn the rest of the Dominion about what happens when you threaten humanity. The space around Earth erupted into the largest battle in human history, and the Galactic Dominion was about to learn why humans had never developed a word that properly translated to surrender. The Battle of Sol began with Admiral Kethvar's fleet completely surrounded by enemies that had appeared from nowhere. His tactical computers struggled to process the sudden appearance of over 300 human vessels, many of them emerging from positions that should have been impossible to hide. How? He demanded of his sensor operators. How did they conceal so many ships? The answer was typically human in its brutal simplicity. They hadn't hidden the ships. They had built them inside asteroids, within dead moons, even inside the hulks of derelict vessels they had deliberately scattered throughout the system. Every piece of space debris the Dominion had dismissed as harmless had potentially been a weapons platform waiting for activation. The human attack began not with energy weapons or missiles, but with something far more devastating to the alien psychology: coordinated ramming attacks. Ships that had been disguised as cargo haulers revealed themselves to be essentially flying bombs, accelerating to enormous speeds before impacting Dominion vessels. Sir, the Vorthak tactical officer reported, his scales now a deep black indicating extreme distress. The humans are deliberately destroying their own ships to damage ours. This behavior pattern isn't in any of our databases. What the aliens couldn't understand was that humans had spent centuries perfecting the concept of acceptable losses. Every ramming ship was crewed by volunteers who had calculated that trading their lives for a Dominion capital ship was an acceptable exchange rate. To the galactic mind, this was insanity. To humans, it was mathematics. Admiral Chen watched the battle unfold from her command center, coordinating the assault with a calmness that would have terrified the aliens if they could have seen it. Around her, officers called out status reports with professional efficiency. Ramming attack on the Dominion flagship successful. Target is venting atmosphere and has lost main power. Asteroid Base 7 reports successful missile launch. Entire payload away and tracking. Mining Platform 12 has revealed kinetic batteries, engaging targets of opportunity. The beauty of the human strategy wasn't just its effectiveness, it was its adaptability. Unlike the rigid formations and predictable tactics the Dominion used, human units operated with something the aliens had never encountered: initiative. Each captain, each platform commander, each weapons operator was empowered to make decisions based on local conditions. Captain Maria Santos, commanding the disguised freighter Lucky Strike, exemplified this approach. When her ramming attack was blocked by Dominion point defense, she immediately switched tactics, using her ship's apparent destruction as cover to deploy a cloud of boarding pods. All teams, "We're going in hot," she announced to her Marine contingent. "Remember, we're not trying to capture these ships. We're trying to break them." Human boarding parties weren't like anything the Dominion had faced. They didn't try to seize control of enemy vessels. They sabotaged critical systems and withdrew, leaving the aliens to deal with cascading failures. Marines would plant explosives in reactor compartments, virus bomb computer networks, or simply weld critical doors shut before escaping in their pods. The psychological effect was devastating. Dominion crews, accustomed to precise technological warfare, found themselves dealing with enemies who seemed to be everywhere at once, who used weapons that violated every principle of civilized combat, and who appeared to take a perverse pleasure in making impossible situations even worse. Admiral Kethvar, struggling to maintain command of a battle that had spiraled completely beyond his understanding, made a decision that would haunt the Dominion for generations to come. He authorized the use of planet-killer weapons. "Target Earth directly," he ordered. "If we cannot defeat their fleet, we'll destroy their world." The massive weapon charged slowly, its antimatter core building to devastating potential. But the humans had anticipated this move as well. As the weapon powered up, seemingly empty space around the Dominion flagship erupted with activity. What appeared to be debris revealed itself to be a network of linked mines, each one equipped with powerful electromagnets and fusion charges. The mines swarmed the planet-killer weapon like antibodies attacking a virus. Their magnetic fields disrupted the antimatter containment just enough to cause a feedback loop. Instead of destroying Earth, the weapon destroyed itself and took half the Dominion flagship with it. Colonel Webb, monitoring the battle from his command bunker, allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. "That's for thinking you could intimidate us with bigger guns," he muttered. But the real turning point came when the humans revealed their most devastating psychological weapon. They started talking to the Dominion crews directly. Dr. Hawkins had spent months learning the alien languages, studying their cultural patterns and developing what she called cognitive warfare. As human hackers broke into Dominion communication networks, she began broadcasting messages designed specifically to shatter alien morale. "Attention Dominion forces." Her voice echoed across every ship in the alien fleet, translated into a dozen different languages. "You are fighting a species that has never learned to surrender. We have been at war with ourselves for our entire recorded history. We have weapons you cannot imagine, tactics you cannot predict, and a willingness to die that you cannot comprehend." The broadcast continued, playing recordings of human history, wars that lasted decades, battles where humans fought to the last man, conflicts where entire civilizations chose mutual destruction over submission, to species that had spent millennia in peaceful expansion and conquest through overwhelming force. It was a glimpse into a fundamentally alien mindset. "Your empire has conquered 3,000 worlds," Dr. Hawkins continued, "but you have never conquered a species like us. We are the descendants of persistence hunters who tracked prey across continents. We are the children of warriors who chose to fight hopeless battles rather than accept defeat. We are humanity, and we do not bow. The effect on Dominion morale was immediate and devastating. Crew efficiency dropped as alien soldiers began to question whether their enemy was entirely sane. Communications chatter filled with uncertainty and fear. Some ships began requesting permission to withdraw. Admiral Kethavar, watching his fleet crumble around him, made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. He ordered all remaining ships to concentrate their fire on Earth itself, hoping to break human resistance by threatening their homeworld. The response was exactly what Dr. Hawkins had predicted. Instead of surrendering to save their planet, human forces became even more aggressive. Ships that had been fighting defensively suddenly launched suicidal attacks. Hidden weapons platforms revealed themselves to engage in direct fire exchanges they couldn't win. The entire human fleet seemed to embrace the concept of mutual annihilation. "This is Admiral Chen to all Dominion forces," came the final human broadcast of the battle. "You wanted to see what happens when you threaten our home. This is what happens. We don't calculate odds. We don't assess cost-benefit ratios, and we don't negotiate with bullies. We fight until we win or until there's nothing left to fight with." As if to emphasize the point, Earth's remaining orbital installations began launching their final payloads, not at the Dominion fleet, but at their own installations. The humans were systematically destroying their own infrastructure rather than let it fall into alien hands. The sight of an entire species choosing scorched Earth tactics over surrender broke something fundamental in the Dominion psyche. These weren't rational actors following logical strategies. These were something unprecedented in galactic history. A species that preferred extinction to subjugation. Admiral Kethavar, his fleet scattered and demoralized, his flagship crippled and burning, faced a choice that no Dominion commander had ever been forced to make. He could continue fighting an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat or demoralize, or he could do something that violated every principle of Dominion doctrine. He could retreat. As he gave the order to withdraw, he realized that this battle had changed more than just the balance of power in one star system. It had shattered the fundamental assumptions upon which the entire galactic dominion was built. They had encountered a species that fought not because they believed they could win, but because they refused to lose. The humans had introduced a concept that would spread like wildfire through the galaxy. Some things were more important than survival, and freedom was worth any price. The Dominion retreat from Sol sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy that had nothing to do with faster-than-light communications. Word of the defeat spread through trade routes, diplomatic channels, and military networks with unprecedented speed. For the first time in recorded galactic history, a Dominion fleet had been driven from a star system by a primitive species. High Counselor Zefkai of the Dominion Ruling Council received Admiral Kethavar's report in the marble halls of the capital world, Nexus Prime. The ancient being's multiple sensory organs focused intently on the holographic battle recordings, trying to comprehend what he was seeing. "You're telling me," Zefkai said slowly, "that a species with no energy shields, no plasma weapons, and no FTL communication somehow destroyed 40% of Task Force Omega?" Kethavar, his uniform bearing the scorch marks of battle, stood at attention despite his injuries. "Yes, High Counselor, but the casualty figures don't tell the complete story. These humans fight with tactics and psychology that we have no framework for understanding. Elaborate. They use their own deaths as weapons. They destroy their own infrastructure rather than lose it. They coordinate attacks through methods our analysts cannot decipher. Most critically, they show no degradation of morale regardless of losses sustained." The High Counselor's sensory stalks writhed in agitation. The Dominion's success had always been built on predictable patterns. Technological superiority led to quick victories, which led to psychological dominance, which led to peaceful integration. The human response violated every assumption about rational behavior. "Recommendations?" Zefkai asked. "Immediate deployment of the First Fleet, full planet-cracking capability. We end this before it spreads." The High Counselor considered this. The First Fleet represented nearly 10% of the Dominion's total military might, a force capable of sterilizing entire star systems. It had never been deployed against a single world. Approved. But Kethavar, understand this. Failure is not an option. The stability of the entire Dominion depends on proving that resistance to our rule is futile. While the Dominion marshaled its greatest military asset, humanity was already preparing for the next phase of the war. Admiral Chen stood in the rebuilt command center, studying intelligence reports that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. "Tell me about the Vishari," she said to Dr. Hawkins, who had become humanity's expert on galactic politics. "Client species of the Dominion, pacifist traders who surrendered without resistance approximately 200 years ago. They provide most of the Dominion's civilian shipping and manufacturing capacity." "And their current status?" Dr. Hawkins smiled grimly. "According to our intercepted communications, they're asking questions. Specifically, they're wondering why the mighty Dominion fleet ran away from a bunch of primitives. The human strategy for the next phase of the war was as audacious as everything else they had attempted. Instead of simply defending Earth, they were going to take the war to the Dominion, not through direct military action, which would have been impossible, but through something far more dangerous to an empire built on assumed superiority: inspiration." Captain James Morrison commanded the fast courier ship Hermes, one of 12 vessels specially modified for deep space operations. His mission was simple in concept but revolutionary in execution: carry the story of humanity's resistance to every corner of the galaxy. "Remember," Admiral Chen had told him during his final briefing, "we're not trying to start a rebellion. We're just telling people what happened here. Sometimes that's enough." The Hermes slipped out of the Sol system using routes that the Dominion didn't know existed, heading for its first destination, the Vishari trade hub at Kepler 442b. Morrison's crew consisted of linguists, psychologists, and historians, people whose job was to understand alien cultures and communicate effectively with them. When they arrived at the Vishari station, Morrison used a technique that was becoming standard for human operations. He didn't try to hide. Instead, he requested docking permission through normal channels and identified himself as a representative of the United Earth Defense Force. The station administrator, a tall, graceful being named Veltar, agreed to meet with him out of pure curiosity. The Vishari had heard rumors about events in the Sol system, but the Dominion's official reports claimed a minor skirmish with no significant outcome. "Captain Morrison," Veltar said in accented galactic standard, "you represent the species that recently encountered Dominion forces?" "That's correct. We thought you might be interested in hearing what actually happened." What Morrison shared over the next several hours was a complete record of the battle, including tactical analysis, casualty figures, and most importantly, the psychological profile that Dr. Hawkins had developed about human motivations. He didn't try to convince the Vishari to rebel. He simply presented the facts and let them draw their own conclusions. The effect was immediate. The Vishari, who had spent 2 centuries believing the Dominion was invincible, suddenly realized they had never actually tested that assumption. More importantly, they began to understand that the Dominion's power was based not on absolute military superiority, but on the psychological conviction that resistance was futile. "Captain," Veltar said quietly, "your species chose to fight even though you knew you would lose." "We fought because we knew we couldn't win," Morrison corrected. "There's a difference. Losing a battle doesn't mean losing a war, and losing a war doesn't mean losing your identity." Similar conversations were taking place throughout the galaxy as human courier ships spread the story of Sol. Each species reacted differently. The warrior caste Theklan began conducting military exercises for the first time in decades. The Hive Mind Collective started questioning whether individual sacrifice could achieve collective goals, and the nomadic wanderer fleet simply began avoiding Dominion space entirely. But the most significant impact was on the Zephyrians, an ancient species that had been among the Dominion's founding members. The Zephyrians possessed technology nearly equal to humanity's opponents, but they had grown complacent over the millennia, assuming their position within the Dominion hierarchy was permanent. Ambassador Tequila of the Zephyrian delegation received the human report in her private chambers on Nexus Prime. As she reviewed the tactical data, she began to see patterns that disturbed her greatly. The Dominion's response to human resistance had been crude, predictable, and ultimately ineffective. More troubling was the realization that the same tactics could potentially be used against any Dominion member species. The Empire's strength lay not in unbeatable technology, but in the widespread belief that resistance was impossible. The humans had shattered that belief through simple, brutal demonstration. Tequila made a decision that would reshape galactic politics. She began quietly reaching out to other founding species, sharing the human battle reports and asking a simple question. If primitives can do this to the Dominion fleet, what does that say about our own security? The answer was obvious and terrifying. The Dominion's power structure was built on a foundation of assumed invincibility that the humans had proven to be false. If one primitive species could inflict such damage, what could a coordinated rebellion of advanced species accomplish? As the Dominion's first fleet prepared to depart for the Sol system, cracks were already forming in the Empire's foundation. Trade routes began experiencing technical difficulties as client species found excuses to delay shipments. Diplomatic communications slowed as member species requested clarification on various policies. Most ominously, several Outer Rim territories began requesting increased autonomy for local security concerns. High Counselor Zefkai, monitoring these developments, realized that the human problem had already metastasized beyond military concerns. The very concept of successful resistance was spreading like a virus through the galactic community. How long until the First Fleet reaches Sol? He asked his military aide. 18 standard days, High Counselor. And how long until these independence movements become active rebellions? Unknown, sir. But our analysts estimate we may be looking at systemic instability within 6 months if current trends continue. Zefkai stared out at the sprawling cityscape of Nexus Prime, watching the lights of 1,000 different species going about their daily lives in apparent harmony. The Dominion had maintained peace and prosperity for millennia through the simple expedient of overwhelming force and the assumption of invincibility. Now a single species of stubborn primitives had introduced chaos into a system that had functioned smoothly for longer than most civilizations had existed. The humans hadn't just defeated a Dominion fleet, they had weaponized the concept of hope. As the First Fleet prepared for what should have been a simple extermination mission, the question was no longer whether humanity could survive the Dominion's response. The question was whether the Dominion itself could survive the ideas that humanity had unleashed upon the galaxy. The Dominion First Fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system like a moving constellation of death. 300 capital ships, each one larger than the biggest human vessel, accompanied by over 1,000 support craft and equipped with weapons capable of cracking planets. Fleet Admiral Morthen, Supreme Commander of Dominion military forces, had come personally to oversee humanity's extinction. This will be different from Kethvar's failure, Morthen announced to his assembled captains via fleet-wide communication. We will not engage their ships. We will not fall for their psychological tactics. We will simply destroy every planet, every asteroid, every piece of matter in this system that could potentially harbor human life. The plan was methodical and brutal. Establish a perimeter at the system's edge, deploy planet-killing weapons, and systematically sterilize every possible hiding place. No boarding actions, no ship-to-ship combat. No opportunity for the humans to employ their unpredictable tactics. Admiral Chen, monitoring the alien fleet's approach from her command bunker deep beneath Earth's surface, felt a cold satisfaction. The Dominion had learned exactly the wrong lesson from their first defeat. They were fighting the last war, not the current one. Phase 4 is authorized, she announced to her staff. Signal our friends that it's time to keep their promises. Across the galaxy, human courier ships had been doing more than just spreading stories of resistance. They had been making deals, forging alliances and calling in favors with species that had their own reasons to see the Dominion weakened. The first sign that something had changed came when the Dominion First Fleet detected massive hyperspace signatures approaching from multiple vectors. Fleet Admiral Morthen studied the tactical display with growing confusion as fleet after fleet dropped out of FTL around the Sol system. Identify those ships, he commanded. Sir, we're reading Zephyrian heavy cruisers, Valkyrie defense fleets, Theclon warrior vessels, and unknown configurations. Estimate total enemy strength at over 2,000 ships. Morthen's multiple hearts began beating faster. Impossible. Our intelligence indicated no major alien presence in this sector. What intelligence hadn't indicated was that humanity had spent the months since their first victory building something unprecedented in galactic history. A coalition of species united not by conquest or trade agreements, but by shared opposition to tyranny. Ambassador Tequela's voice crackled across Dominion communication channels from the bridge of the Zephyrian flagship, Ancient Honor. Fleet Admiral Morthen, you are in violation of the Accords of Nexus 7. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The Accords? Morthen demanded of his staff. What is she talking about? His intelligence officer, a nervous Corvani, consulted his databanks rapidly. Sir, the Accords of Nexus 7 were signed 3 days ago by representatives of 47 species. They declare the Sol system to be under mutual protection status. Impossible. The Dominion Council never authorized such accords, no sir. The signatures are from species acting independently of Dominion authority. The political implications hit Morthen like a physical blow. In 3 months, humanity had managed to convince nearly 50 species to formally break ranks with the Dominion and sign mutual defense pacts. The empire that had maintained unity for millennia was fracturing before his eyes, but politics could be dealt with later. He had his orders. All ships ignore the alien fleets and proceed with planet-killing operations. Target Earth first. The massive antimatter weapons began charging, their energy signatures visible across light years. But as they powered up, something unprecedented happened. The assembled alien fleets didn't just threaten to intervene, they actually opened fire. The space around Sol erupted into the largest battle in recorded galactic history. Zephyrian plasma cannons perfected over millennia of warfare tore through Dominion shields like paper. Vashari ships, their hulls designed for trade but modified for war, swarmed Dominion vessels like angry insects. The Teclon, warrior poets who had spent centuries in peaceful meditation, rediscovered their love of glorious combat. But the most devastating attacks came from ships that the Dominion couldn't even identify. Humanity's industrial capacity, hidden throughout the system and expanded with alien technology, had produced vessels that combined human tactical innovation with advanced galactic engineering. Captain Morrison, now commanding the hybrid destroyer Terra's Vengeance, led a squadron of these impossible ships into the heart of the Dominion formation. His vessel combined human stealth technology with Zephyrian energy weapons and Vashari defensive systems, creating something that shouldn't have been able to exist but was devastatingly effective. All squadrons, remember the plan. Morrison broadcast. We're not trying to destroy every enemy ship. We're trying to break their will to fight. The human contribution to the battle wasn't just military, it was psychological. Dr. Hawkins, working with xenopsychologists from a dozen different species, had developed warfare techniques specifically designed to shatter Dominion morale. Every Dominion ship in the system suddenly found their communication networks flooded with broadcasts in their own languages, showing not just the current battle but footage from dozens of other star systems where Dominion authority was being challenged. The message was simple but devastating. The Empire was collapsing, their cause was hopeless, and resistance was spreading everywhere. Fleet Admiral Morthen, watching his perfectly planned extermination mission turn into a nightmare of friendly fire and psychological warfare, made a decision that violated every principle of Dominion doctrine. He ordered a full retreat. Sir, his tactical officer protested, we still outnumber the enemy forces. Numbers don't matter when half our own member species are shooting at us, Morthen replied bitterly. Signal General retreat. We're withdrawing to Nexus Prime. But retreat proved impossible. The Allied fleet, coordinated by human tactical doctrine and alien technology, had surrounded the Dominion forces completely. Every escape route was blocked, every hyperspace jump point was covered. The hunters had become the hunted. Admiral Chen, monitoring the battle from Earth, opened a communication channel to the Dominion flagship. Fleet Admiral Morthen, this is Admiral Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. Are you ready to discuss surrender terms? Morthen's image appeared on her screen, his alien features twisted with rage and disbelief. You dare offer me terms? We are the Galactic Dominion. We have ruled this galaxy for 3,000 years. You were the Galactic Dominion, Chen corrected. Now you're just another fleet that picked a fight with the wrong species. But I'm feeling generous today. Here are my terms. Immediate cessation of hostilities. Withdrawal of all Dominion forces from systems that wish to declare independence. And formal recognition of the Galactic Liberation Alliance. What alliance? Chen smiled. The one that was officially founded about 6 minutes ago, when the Zephyrian ambassador signed the Treaty of Sol. Congratulations, Admiral. You're witnessing the birth of a new galactic order. The reality was exactly as brutal as Chen described. While the First Fleet had been traveling to Sol, human diplomats had been completing negotiations with species throughout the galaxy. The Dominion's response to human resistance had convinced dozens of member species that their own positions within the Empire were no longer secure. The Treaty of Sol, signed in real time during the battle, established the Galactic Liberation Alliance as a mutual defense organization committed to the principle that no species should be forced to bow to another. The founding members included not just humanity's recent allies, but several founding species of the Dominion itself. Fleet Admiral Morthen, facing the complete destruction of his fleet and the collapse of the empire he had served for centuries, found himself confronted with an impossible choice: surrender to primitives who had been discovered less than a year ago, or fight to the death against an alliance that included some of the most advanced species in the galaxy. "I need time to consider," he said finally. "You have 5 minutes," Chen replied. "After that, we start implementing the human doctrine." "What doctrine?" "The one that says if you won't listen to reason, we'll keep hitting you until you do. It's worked pretty well for us so far." As Morthen cut the communication, he realized that humanity had accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. They hadn't just defeated the Dominion militarily, they had replaced it politically. In less than a year, a single species of stubborn primitives had dismantled an empire that had lasted for millennia. The age of the Galactic Dominion was ending, and the age of free worlds was about to begin. All because one species had refused to bow. 5 years after the Battle of Sol, Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the Terran Embassy, humanity's first diplomatic station in what had once been Dominion space. Through the massive viewport, she could see ships from dozens of species, docking at the sprawling complex that had grown around the original human outpost. The galaxy had changed in ways that would have seemed impossible when the first Dominion ships arrived at Earth. The Galactic Liberation Alliance now encompassed over 200 species, united not by conquest, but by the radical principle that every civilization had the right to determine its own destiny. "Admiral," Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins approached, carrying a data tablet filled with reports from across the galaxy. "The monthly intelligence briefing is ready." Chen accepted the tablet and reviewed the summary. The former Dominion territories had fragmented into dozens of independent governments, some forming regional alliances, others choosing complete isolation. The transition hadn't been entirely peaceful. Several species had attempted to establish their own mini-empires, but the principle of self-determination was gradually taking hold. "What about the core worlds?" Chen asked, referring to the handful of systems still controlled by the remnants of the original Dominion, holding steady at about 40 systems. High Counselor Zefkai has accepted the new reality and is focusing on internal reconstruction. "No aggressive moves in the past 18 months, Chen nodded. The reduced Dominion wasn't the galactic threat it had once been, but it wasn't entirely powerless either. Some species genuinely preferred the stability and order that Imperial rule provided, and the Liberation Alliance had reluctantly accepted that freedom included the right to choose subjugation. And the human colonies? Expanding rapidly. The Kepler 4042 system is officially independent as of last week, and the New Australia colony has requested full membership in the alliance." Dr. Hawkins paused. "There's also a request from the Zephyrian Republic for human military advisors." "Declined," Chen said immediately. "We're not in the business of building empires, even friendly ones." This had been one of the most difficult aspects of humanity's new role in galactic politics. Their military innovations and tactical doctrines were in high demand, but Chen and the human leadership were determined not to repeat the Dominion's mistakes. They would defend freedom but not impose it. The communications console chimed with an incoming priority message. The holographic display showed Fleet Admiral Morthen, the former Dominion commander who had become an unlikely ally in the years since his surrender at Sol. "Admiral Chen," Morthen said, his alien features showing what humans had learned to recognize as respect. "I have news that may interest you." "I'm listening." "We've detected signals from beyond the galactic rim. Deep space sensors indicate a massive fleet approaching from the Andromeda Galaxy. Estimated time of arrival, 18 months. Chen felt a familiar chill. Humanity's introduction to galactic politics had taught them that there was always someone bigger, stronger, and more dangerous somewhere in the universe. The question was whether the galaxy's newly free species could work together to face a threat from outside. What do we know about them? Very little. The signals are unlike anything in our databases. What concerns me is that they appear to be following the same expansion pattern the Dominion used 3 millennia ago: systematic conquest of star systems along a predetermined route. Chen studied the star charts Morthen transmitted. The approaching fleet was indeed massive, potentially larger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. But there was something different about this threat. The Dominion had conquered through technological superiority and psychological dominance. These new arrivals might represent something else entirely. Admiral, Dr. Hawkins spoke up, having overheard the conversation. This could be exactly what the Alliance needs to solidify its unity. Nothing brings former enemies together like facing a common threat. Chen considered this. The past 5 years had seen remarkable progress in galactic cooperation, but old rivalries and cultural differences still created friction within the Alliance. The prospect of external invasion might indeed forge the diverse coalition into something stronger. Morthen, she said, I'm transmitting our current defense protocols and strategic assessments. I think it's time for the galaxy to learn what humans call total war. The former Dominion Admiral's expression shifted to something that might have been amusement. You realize, Admiral, that you're proposing to teach the entire galaxy how to fight like humans. Got a better idea? Over the following months, a transformation swept through Alliance space that would have been unthinkable during the Dominion era. Species that had spent centuries in peaceful coexistence began developing weapons technologies. Trade routes were converted into supply lines. Most significantly, the rigid hierarchies that had characterized galactic civilization for millennia began breaking down as everyone prepared for asymmetric warfare. The Vashari, former pacifist traders, became experts in logistics and supply chain warfare. The Teclon rediscovered their warrior heritage and began training others in combat philosophy. Even the ethereal collective, a hive mind species that had rarely engaged in physical conflict, began developing strategies for coordinated resistance. But the most significant change was cultural. Humanity's concept of acceptable losses and necessary sacrifice spread throughout the Alliance, fundamentally altering how other species thought about conflict and survival. The galaxy was learning to think like humans. Captain Morrison, now commanding the Alliance's Rapid Response Fleet, reported back from deep space reconnaissance missions with increasingly detailed intelligence about the approaching force. What they discovered was both reassuring and terrifying. They're not like the Dominion, he reported to the Alliance Council. The Dominion conquered to integrate other species into their empire. These newcomers appear to be exterminating everything in their path. The revelation sent shockwaves through the galactic community. This wasn't a political conflict about self-determination. It was a fight for survival. Species that had spent years debating the fine points of independence suddenly found themselves united by the simple desire to continue existing. Admiral Chen, now serving as Supreme Commander of Alliance Defense Forces, addressed the assembled representatives from 200 worlds. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished beings of all classifications, she began, we are about to face the greatest challenge in galactic history. Our enemies aren't coming to conquer us, they're coming to replace us. She gestured to the tactical display showing the enemy's projected route. But they've made the same mistake that the Dominion made when they first encountered humanity. They think they understand what they're dealing with. They think they're facing the same galaxy that existed 1,000 years ago. Divided, hierarchical, predictable. The display shifted to show Alliance defensive positions, supply networks, and coordination protocols that spanned the entire galaxy. They're not. They're facing a galaxy that has learned to fight like humans. A galaxy that has embraced the radical idea that freedom is worth any price, including extinction. As the Alliance fleets took their positions for the greatest battle in galactic history, Chen reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. 5 years ago, humanity had been alone, facing what seemed like impossible odds against an overwhelming enemy. Now they were part of something unprecedented. A galactic civilization united not by conquest or convenience, but by shared values and mutual respect. The approaching fleet from Andromeda represented everything the galaxy had rejected: the idea that might made right, that advanced technology justified subjugation, that resistance was futile. They were about to discover why the galactic dominion, despite all its power and experience, had crumbled when it encountered a single species that refused to bow. The galaxy's elite had indeed crumbled when faced with humanity's stubborn refusal to surrender. Now it was time to see what happened when an entire galaxy adopted the human philosophy: that some things were more important than survival, and freedom was worth fighting for regardless of the odds. As the enemy fleet approached the galactic rim, Admiral Chen smiled grimly. They had taught the galaxy how to fight like humans. Soon the Andromeda invaders would learn why that was a mistake they would not survive to regret. Earth would not bow, and now neither would anyone else.